Hey guys, welcome back. And this is your next video on using the sequelize ORM with Node.js. In the last video, we talked a little bit about how I would go about structuring data, and I showed you that I added a permissions table along with a foreign key permission ID to this user table. And let's talk about how you actually set up foreign keys and associations in sequelize. So the first thing I actually need to do is I need to delete this user's table from my database. And the reason that I need to do that is that it's no longer valid. I don't want to add the foreign key using SQL, although it's entirely possible. Like if this were a mature database that I could not simply delete the user table and add a new column that's a foreign key to it, it's entirely possible for you to do that. Sequelize won't hurt you if you take this. So let's see here. If I were to write something like this, so let's see here, alter table users, add column. What did we call it? Permission ID. And it's going to be an int. Int. Yeah, we'll just say int. Not null. That'll be it. Okay. So I could run this code right here. And sequelize, so hold on, let it actually run, no database, alter table. Okay, so I could run this code right here, and now if I select all of the rows from this column, we will see that there is going to be a permission ID attached here. So if I were to go in to the user's model and add a permission ID under deleted at right here, it would totally work, or I could add it right here. It would totally work, and sequelize would be okay with that. But because we are able to change this table right now, it's not something that's in production, I'm just going to go ahead and delete the entire table and then recreate it with the foreign key attached. So what we want to do is, first and foremost, we do want to create that new attribute here. So we will say permission underscore ID, and we need to create a type. Now here's the thing, we need to make sure that whatever type this is matches the key, or the primary key type of the permission table, or sorry, the permission model, which we haven't created yet. But we can just assume that it will be an integer, because in all likelihood, there's not going to be a huge amount of permissions. Right now, I can only think of two, and that's student and admin. So we'll say type data type dot integer, and then we'll say required true, and allow null is false. This permission ID can never be null. Well, actually, I'm going to say that we're going to make that true, because I'm still playing around with the idea that a user might be able to not have a permission. Okay. No, if you're a user, I take that back. Yeah, if you're an actual user, you've signed in, you have an account, you need to have a permission ID. There's no such thing as having a null permission. Even if I delete you, you can still have a permission ID. So we'll leave that be. And then we're going to create a new model called permission. So create a new file, and I'm going to call this permissions. We'll call it permissions. And then in users, I'm just going to, in users, I'm just going to select all and copy that right on over into my permissions file. Because there's some stuff in here I don't want to retype. So then I'm going to take everything from updated at up to first name, and I'm going to delete that. So now it looks like this. Okay. We're going to change the user table to be permission. And then we are going to change this to be an integer. Now, when you use an integer for the main ID type that's a primary key, you need to make sure to set auto increment to true. And this will make sure that every time a user ID gets added, the database will automatically increase or change the user ID on its own. Otherwise, you're going to have to manage this all on its own. And why on earth would you want to do that when you can simply do it with this? Okay. So we want to make sure that auto increment is set to true. And then we're going to add a couple things. We're going to add something under here. So remember that here I have an ID and a type. And this is just going to be a string of text. Technically, you could get away with just having the ID. But I want something that kind of like in the future allows me to change IDs and also has some kind of descriptive reference to what they are. So we'll say that our type is equal to, so type and then data types dot string. All right, we're going to say required is true, allow null is false. Let's go to our index.js file of our models. And we need to actually create the association now. We need to tell sequelize that this permission ID has a foreign key in users. Also, another thing I like to do real quick, I'm just going to go into the user model. I like to create a comment right here, just letting future users know that this permission ID is actually a foreign key in permission table. Okay. If we don't include this, so if we exit this out like this, and we create an association, sequelize will automatically place a permission ID in this table. And you know what? I'm going to show you that real quick. So I'm going to leave that out of this user's model. You don't need to, but I'll show you what happens. I'll leave that out of this user's model. And in our index.js file, right before sequelize.authenticate, is where I'm going to place all of my associations. And I put them in the index.js file of the models folder for simplicity's sake, so that I can keep them all together. I like having them all in one space, and then I actually make them alphabetic so that I know, I order them alphabetically so that I always know where to look for a specific association. So the first one we would have then is the permissions. So what we're going to write, first let's write a comment, so permissions. And we'll write db, because remember, all of our models have now been placed at this point on this db object. So that's what's going to give us access to them. So we will write db dot permission but we'll write db.permission dot has many. Now, what does has many mean? Has many, if we look at our model, or not model, schema, we can see that this table is going to have a lot of these foreign keys, right? There's going to be, let's say there's 10 users. Okay, so we have 10 users in our database, and each of them has a permission ID. Well, our permission table then has 10 foreign keys inside of our user table. So has many is whenever you see a primary key that's being fed into a table as a foreign key, the relationship that the primary key has to the foreign key is that it has many. And sequelize has an entire section on associations. If it loads. So it has an entire thing on associations, and there's has many, has one, and belongs to many. Oh, so we're going to really cover this belongs to and this has many in this section. All right. So our permission table has many db dot user. All right. And remember, in our user model, we defined this table as user. Yes, our database pluralized it into users, but we defined it as user without the S. So in the index file, we don't say db.users, we say db.user to reference this model. All right, next we have our users. So we'll say db.user, remember user, and then we'll say belongs to. So we have another association here, belongs to, right? And I don't think it really gives a great definition here. So remember looking here that our permission table has many, but we can really see that our user table, this foreign key, belongs to permission. That's a good way to think that, is the foreign key belongs to permission. And anytime you see a foreign key inside of a table, it is a belongs to relationship. So we'll say our db.user.belongs to db.permission. And this is telling sequelize that it needs to use a foreign key of some kind. So now, if we go into our actual database manager and we drop our users table, okay, so that dropped that. I want to make you aware of one thing. What are we doing for time? 17 minutes? All right, so let's make you aware of one thing. Remember that in our users table, I deleted this permission entrance, right? So initially I had a permission ID here, but I got rid of it. So let's run this real quick and see what sequelize does. Okay, so we're going to run npm run debug. All right, so we see that everything ran. It created two different tables for us. And if we look in our DB now and refresh things, we have a users table and we have a, we have a permissions table. And let's look at everything that we have in the permissions table. So we have a type, an ID, a type, updated at, deleted at, and created at. That's good. Now I want us to look at our users table. All right, so we see something happen down here. How do I, there we go. And let's do this. We see something happen down here. Let's actually select our users table and look at what we got. So we have a permissions ID column here. And we see here that our permission ID is bolded in black, telling us that it's a foreign key to something. So if I open up my users table and I look at my foreign keys, I see I have this foreign key sitting here now. And it says that this target, so we have a permissions ID, it targets permissions ID. So that's excellent. We have what we needed. So then why in my users table did I not put, hold on. Why in my users table did I get rid of this permission ID? Well, the thing is, this isn't necessarily needed, right? As I can show, as we see here, it's going to create that foreign key for us, whether or not we have this in there or not. Whether or not we have this in there or not. The reason that I put this permission ID here is that I want some kind of documentation. It's a foreign key, but I still want it to be required. It's a foreign key, but I still want it to not be allowed, or still be allowed to be null. And it's a foreign key, but I still want to make the check for the data type before I try and enter it. Otherwise, I'll get a foreign key exception if I try and enter something that's not an integer or a foreign key somewhere else. So if someone looks at my user's model, they're going to know that there's a permission ID in here. They aren't going to need to scour through my index.js file and be like, well, what are all of the relationships? You know, is there a relationship? Does the user have any relationship to permissions? Because as this file gets bigger, you're going to have more and more associations. If we look at this guy, we see that there's actually quite a few foreign keys. Anytime you see these yellow boxes, we have foreign keys. But even when you don't see them, we have foreign keys in our response, in our answer. We have a foreign key in our users table. You know, so there's going to be a lot of keys running around here, and we want to make sure that things are legible. So now, let's say I go back in here and I drop this users table again. Okay, and then I let this code run again. So we'll let the code run. This will restart, do its thing, and we'll see it run again. And now, if I refresh this and I select users, I see that I have this permission ID again. So sequelize does not only do I have it again, but it's in a different position. It's not at the end. And that's because sequelize does recognize that I included it in my user's model. So as long as this string matches whatever sequelize would put in there by default, it will use that instead of creating its own. Okay, so that's pretty much it for that. I know this was a longer video. The next video is going to make this video look short, because now that we've kind of covered, well, no. The next video, I'm probably going to talk about identifying users. So I am actually going to do one last thing at the end of this video. I know it's been about 25 minutes and we're going on some long time. I'm going to add some things here though. So we're going to add one type admin And then we're going to add two type type student okay, type student, and we're going to do created at. So we'll just do what is today? March 31st. So 03/31 2019, and we'll just say 9 a.m. So 09:00:00. Okay. Let's copy all of that because I don't want to repeat all of this several times. And we'll place that here and here. Oop, not there. There's nothing in there. We'll do it in updated at and deleted at. So we're doing this completely manually. Okay. All right. Oh, it didn't like what I entered. Year. Oh. Okay. 2019. 3. I can never remember the date, the format for these dates. All right, 3/31. So all copy, paste. Okay, apply. All right, so that's good. And then delete this third one. Don't know how you got in there. Delete this and apply. All right, so this is what our table is really going to look like. We have 1 admin, 2 student. That we really won't be doing anything else with this table. We did updated at and created at manually, and that should be good to go. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. I've tried to explain how much you